I've got you too, PJ. Hopefully back home, guys, you can see us on some kind of split screen. I'm trying to take this Ask AEAC to another level for you. If you're new here and you're not familiar, this is where I take YouTuber comments or my audience comments from the two YouTube channels, this one and AEAC Home, and read them aloud and kind of discuss them so we can all learn ourselves something. Now, PJ, full disclosure, you and I are in a little bit of trouble because Katya was having some feelings about this being her role, and now I'm asking you, and and she wanted me to make sure, guys and gals back home, that you knew that this is still going to be Katya's and my thing, and you're going to see her a lot on this over the coming months and years, hopefully. But I do want to broaden it where I involve industry people, and PJ, together you and I can answer these questions, and maybe the what's the word I'm looking for? Not the exposure, but the experience for the audience will be a richer one because you and I will get some dialogue going, and maybe we can all just learn more that way.
Yeah, and I think we know different things.
Yeah, exactly. So if you guys don't know PJ has his own YouTube channel. It's called Wisconsin Airgunners. It's very good, and I am not ashamed to say, like, I had been watching you over the years, but I didn't realize the resource the airgun industry had in you until I interviewed you at the Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge a couple of years back. Dude, I found myself coming away from that. I was really taken aback by the level at which you understand air guns and tuning air guns and all of that stuff. It was what?
I'm glad you think so.
I was blown away. I was like, I can't believe the industry hasn't grabbed a hold of this guy because he just gets it. And I was like, I got to do an Ask AEAC with PJ because I learned from you, and hopefully the audience will too once we get through these questions.
Well, happy to help out any way I can. I mean, that's always been what our channel's been about, is talking about things that generally it's like, I wonder what or how or if, and then we'll go out and try it and see what happens.
Yeah, for
really
sure.
Started.
Do you want to, I've certainly got some things that come to mind, when I think of introducing you to my audience. Do you want me to try to run with that ball and give you a grand intro, or do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
There's something about getting introduced by something like you that I would not pass up.
All right, let me just come out and say it, guys. So you accuse me, audience, of being like really detail oriented. I feel like I've met my match when it comes to PJ, and also his intelligence when it comes to just everything in air guns is honestly a little bit overwhelming. So there's that. So, but PJ is also a 30-year some veteran of the Marathon County Sheriff's Office up in Wisconsin. He's kind of worked his way all the way up to the top there, and now he teaches at the academy, and he's a firearm instructor. I think you've been deputy police chief and investigator, police chief and patrol, and all of that stuff. So
I think the Beatles have a song. It's a long and winding road.
Yeah, we don't need to, we don't want to take up too much of the audience's time, but you've got credentials, and I'm really excited to do this with you. Now, guys, I've got about 15 questions here, pulled from the two YouTube channels, which are your questions. I will tell you right up front, this is going to focus, I picked these questions because they focus a lot around airgun tuning, but they're not all airgun tuning. And they also focus a lot around the tuning of FX airguns. And the reason that I've done that is because that's where I feel, and I could be totally wrong, PJ's strengths lie, because he's a professional shooter for Team Saber Tactical and Donnie. I've seen you compete. I've seen you do well. You just had a recent huge victory with FX Airguns. Maybe we'll get into that. Maybe we won't, with your harmonic barrel tuner. And now they're producing, one of your brain babies, for the public. But there are going to be other air guns that are peppered into these 15 questions. So if you have an interest, just hang on, and I think we're going to have a lot of good dialogue today.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to talk about the FX tuning simply because FX is built with let's have people tune it in mind.
Yes.
And some other manufacturers, that's not their thought process. And that's great, because that means that we get choices of what we want to work with, or in some cases deal with, or have access to. I mean, I really think those choices that manufacturers make right now are giving us the best of both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. I mean, everybody knows that both approaches to the industry have their place. There are a whole lot of people that don't want to fool with tuning an air gun. They want a good high-performance air gun right out of the box that they don't feel like they have to fiddle with. That being said, I want to make sure that I'm not sending the message that if you're into FX, if you like, the ability to change stuff, that doesn't mean that you're going to have to. And I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself, because we're going to get into that in some of these questions, but because there's a couple of different schools there. But I think I'm just going to jump right into this, PJ, and I'm sure you and I are going to have tons to say about.
Let's do it, man.
About all of this. All right, so the first question does come from the FX Maverick Setup Guide on AEAC Vlog, this channel. It's from Trevor McDaniel. Trevor writes, "Hey, wondering if you could help me with my first FX rifle ! Have the VP in 22 cal, and your video has been very helpful, but I'm having trouble tuning for the 23 grain NSA and Patriot slugs. Trying to get it to around 950 feet per second for longer range hunting, but my velocities seem to be all over the place. Any tips on where to start with the power wheel and micro adjuster?" So do you have some thoughts there? Because I know I do.
I do have some thoughts.
Go for it, buddy.
So I actually start with some questions.
Okay.
I'm an educator by trade now. That's my full-time gig. So a lot of times the question leads to a question. And I don't 100% know what he means by his velocities are all over the place. So let's run a couple scenarios maybe.
Okay.
I could envision where he starts at power 1, has a velocity, 2, it goes up, 3, it goes up, 4, it goes up, 5, it goes down, 6, it goes down, 7, it goes down.
We call that the rainbow.
Right. And what that means is you've got more hammer spring than that reg pressure can handle. So back off on the hammer spring until you're not seeing a rainbow, but you're seeing the front side of a hill with just that little bit maybe of a let off. And there's schools of thought that you want 7 to actually be a little let off, or you want 7 to be before the peak. That's personal preference.
Yeah, totally. Go ahead. Sorry.
If he's saying he's getting inconsistent velocities, I would first look at the possibility that he's cranked in that hammer spring adjustment, like too much hammer spring for a given reg pressure. I've seen that a number of times where you're just mashing that, just slamming that valve so hard that it's not doing what it's not in balance, it's not in harmony.
Yeah, my mind went to where yours went, and it went for the long pass on some other stuff too, where maybe I was looking a little too deep into this. But with velocities all over the place, guys, like what PJ was saying, tuning is one of those things where to be good at it, you kind of have to wrap your mind around the basic concept. And the basic concept for me has always been that inside of an air gun, there are opposing mechanical forces and there are opposing air pressures. With the valves and the hammer springs and the regulator pressure. And when they get out of harmony, in other words, when one is too high for where the other wants to be, you start to see like these erratic velocities. And so the first thing I do when I see erratic velocities is I think, well, there's probably not enough hammer spring force, as far as how you have that dialed in to match the pressure of the regulator where I have it currently set. So normally by increasing my hammer spring tension, that almost always for me levels out, that alligator shot tooth shot chart for that given or specific pressure. Now, that all being said, and you and I have had talks in private about this before, and I think we even talked about it in our RMAC video. I think for Trevor, my advice to you, Trevor, and I'd like to hear yours too for this, PJ, would be, I think he said he was shooting a 22 cal and 23 grain slug in a Maverick. He's watching the Maverick video. I'm guessing it's a Maverick. It doesn't have to be. Guys, if you don't have even an FX, all of the same approach applies to tuning a airgun. It's literally all the same teachings and all the same takeaways. But I'm thinking what I normally like to do, Trevor, is I like to just grab a number out of the air for my regulator setting. Experience tells me with a 22 cal, I don't know how long your barrel is, but I'm going to be setting the regulator to begin with for a 23 grain, maybe at somewhere between 100 and 120 bar, with 120 being on the high side. I might just pick a number of like 100 to begin with, just to see where I'm at. And then I'm going to back that hammer spring tension all the way off. And then I'm going to shoot and if I remember, the FX has a 250 bar fill, so I'm going to fill it to somewhere in the middle, maybe 210-ish, 200-ish. And I'm going to take a couple shots and see if I'm running nice and flat. If I'm not, I'm going to slowly increase that hammer spring tension.
Steve, where are you putting the wheel to do this first work? Are you going to the low side or are you going to the high side?
Sure. So the wheel is just like a cam, like on a camshaft on a motor. So I'm always picking, I've done it different ways, to be honest, PJ. But I think for Trevor wanting to shoot on the high side, I'm just setting that power wheel or that cam to its highest setting.
Okay.
Because that's almost like a gain knob for your stereo or your computer. And then you back the hammer spring all the way off from there. So as power wheel, I'd go to the max, and then I'd back that hammer spring, that micro adjuster he referred to it as, all the way off. I'm going to fill the maybe 210 bar, take 5 shots, see if it's running flat. If it's not, I'm going to keep running that hammer spring tighter and tighter, not by a lot, like a quarter turn at a time. And eventually I'll find a place where, go ahead.
That's a good point.
Yeah, eventually I'll find
tiny turns.
Yeah, because you can overshoot it by like 1/8 of a turn.
Super
and
easy.
Literally by like 1/10 of a turn, once you get it dialed in, is the difference between really good at 100 yards and good at 100 yards. But so back all the way off it, bring it up until it
can't possibly have any effect on anything.
What's that?
Like the amount of turn, I think most people think that can't possibly be any significant amount of turn. Like I will put
I see what you're
there,
saying. Yeah.
And I will be like, did that even
like
move?
a millimeter? Yeah.
And I will like take it off and shoot it and see what tiny adjustments is key.
Yeah, because you can overshoot it. It's one of those things where you're funneling and you're searching, but in the beginning you have to have kind of like this broad stroke, and so I find myself going a quarter turn at a time until I get into the velocity range that at least I think I want to be, and then I'll take 5 shots and see if it's flat, take 5 if it's flat, and just keep going a quarter at a time. And eventually you'll see that ES and SD really start to shrink. And then you'll know that you're kind of honed in on that sweet spot. And then I'll fine tune from there, little 1/8 of a turn, and what'll happen, or excuse me, little like 1/10 turns. And you'll see what you'll see ultimately, Trevor, is a 3 or 4 foot per second standard deviation on the FXs drop to like a 2, a 1.8, a 1.9, a 1.7, and then you'll know you're home for that particular regulator setting. Okay. But not to complicate things, but that may not translate into accuracy. So what you'll have to do for your rifle, I don't know if you have a compact one or a long one.
He said the value pack, which would be the 600 millimeter barrel, if I assume.
Okay, so that's somewhere in the middle. All I was going to add is the shorter barrels are going to require a higher regulator pressure and a higher hammer spring tension to work. They're just going to require more than the longer barrels. Yeah. Interesting. He was trying to get his NSAs or Patriots to around 950 for long range hunting. I personally struggle with the slugs and trying to figure out where they do well at. I feel like it's such a narrow window and it's so all over the place. At least it has been for me.
Yeah, and I think you get, if are you shooting the heavy superior or the standard superior is going to be a factor in that. I think you can stabilize. My experience has been and I'm fairly like I just brought in this M3 specifically for slugs and getting my head more educated about the slug game, because that is a little bit newer to me. But I think you can stabilize at a little bit slower speed with a little bit more aggressive twist. I think you have to wind up committing that you're gonna get to that. Okay, I'm at 940. What is it doing? I'm satisfied or I'm not. And then I would say, okay, now I'm going to set a target of 950 and do the same thing that you just talked about, because it's not always as simple as, well, I'm just going to give it a little bit more hammer spring. It's you need to be in, if you want the most accuracy you can wring out of the system.
Here we go, guys. Here he goes.
You set a target and you work towards it, and you see if it works, and then you set another target and you do all the balance work. It is not as simple as, okay, I'm at 890 at 1 and I'm at 960 at 7. There are some tunes where that works really well, and with pellets, it's way easier to do that. It's way easier to work a range of pellets with accuracy than it is to do slugs.
Yeah.
And I don't know anybody else that's telling us any different.
It's been hard for me, honestly, like, to your point, and to kind of mix it with what I'm thinking. I can do all of the hard work at home to get a nice shot chart in what I think is the proper velocity with a 15 ES and a 2 SD, and then go out and shoot at 100 yards, and the gun didn't like it. The barrel didn't like it. The harmonics didn't like it. The pulse wave didn't like it. The waist air, I mean, it just didn't like it.
What's maddening is then you can tune something every once in a while to where, your extreme spread is like 40 and you've got a standard deviation of 7, and it's hitting all the places I want it to hit.
And we've talked about that. Like, people get really hyper focused on, I need an ESD of less than 10 or my gun's no good. Dude, I've seen them with a 30 ES shoot 1-inch groups at 100 yards.
Yep.
It's just the kookiest thing. I tend to really, as we dive into this and learn more about this as a community going forward, and I was talking about this the other day, I'm really starting to have this shift in my mind. Like, it's less ES and SD and a lot more pellet, slug, barrel interface / harmonics / when the projectile leaves the barrel, there's not a whole lot of extra cough air coming out around it that's going to disrupt it. It's almost like the airwave comes up the barrel and just stops short, and out goes the pellet or slug. And I'm really starting to have this shift in my head, like, that's really where the accuracy comes from. Yeah, but I don't know. We're all kind of learning together. Let me make sure we're not missing. If you want to add to that, I just want to make sure we're not missing anything from Trevor here.
Well, I think one of the big takeaways from every conversation I have with anybody about this is that there's probably more in front of us yet to discover than there is laying behind us to pick up and know.
Oh, for sure. We're right at the beginning, really, of the airgun industry getting smart and understanding this, and then the community understand. I think the engineers are learning as they go.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's like, well, that works. Let's build it and sell it. And then, and it's just like, well, that works sometimes, but not all the time. But I think we've given Trevor a lot.
Yeah.
So just to recap, Trevor, pick a random reg pressure, try 100, try 110, try 120, whatever. Back way out, set your cam to like your power wheel to like a 7, back way out on that micro adjuster, work your way in till it gets flat, the velocity gets where you want it. If you can stabilize it to where it's nice and tight on your velocities, maybe throw just another 5 bar on top of the reg to kind of hyper stabilize that, and then go out and test it and for accuracy and see what it does. If you don't like it, go all the way back to the drawing board with like a 110 reg pressure, work it all over again, get it nice and flat, then stabilize it by jumping up to 115, go out and accuracy test. It's all about finding that balance, Trevor, inside the gun with those opposing forces and pressures. And if you have alligator teeth, something's out of balance.
One of the things I think is really important to remember, and I'm sure you've seen this as you've done all the in-depth stuff you've done with a number of different tunable rifles, there are multiple ways to get to any given velocity.
Mm-hmm.
And not all of them are going to be equal for every gun.
That is such a great point.
When I got my Maverick, which is a compact, I was shooting Hades, which is my preferred pesting pellet, at right around 906, 907 feet per second, which they love to fly at that speed. I get great results at that speed. That's always my target. I'll go a little lower if I have to, but I love that just over 9. Really accurate, but it's a compact and not, a really snappy firing cycle and not great efficiency. I was going through air pretty fast. I retuned it and I have the regulator right now at 88. It was the original reg setting was close to 130. I've backed it off to 88.
Oh, such a great point.
Lowered the hammer spring and then worked it up to where, okay, this is the velocity I want. Same accuracy, but I probably get close to another magazine, if not a mag and a half, before I have to refill. And the firing cycle and the cocking are just lighter. It's not like my Dreamline, but it's certainly a friendlier gun to shoot than it was.
That's what I love about you, PJ, is you see this with a clarity, and you are so dead on. Like as you're speaking, I'm remembering all my experiences tuning all these air guns, and I'm thinking back to Trevor. And yeah, I can get to 950 feet per second with 160 bar reg and my hammer spring cranked way up. So those guys are working so hard with each other, but I can also get to 950 feet per second on like 105 bar reg and that hammer spring backed out and the gun's not working and there's not all this waste air and it shoots better and it's not violent. That's a fantastic point. Yeah.
Don't be afraid of a low reg pressure, because with the right setup and everything in balance, you might be able to get there. You have to have the courage to, I'm going to try something.
Yeah, you want to try them, and I will say in talking, go ahead, sorry.
It's hard when you get something that's set up pretty well. The temptation to if I change it, am I going to get right back to where
No, you'll never. It's so hard to find exactly where you are. You will, but it's going to take
It's a challenge to do it, and it's a commitment.
You know what I've always pondered, PJ, is we say a high reg pressure. That high reg pressure, that's going to be a different number in everybody's mind.
Yep. Yeah.
Because everyone knows that the amp regulators on the FXs are basically designed to hold together on up to about 180 bars. So 170 is probably as high as you want to go, right? But a high reg pressure for me, and in talking to professional shooters, 120, 125, 130, that's high. When I think of a low reg pressure, and I like to run guns, I like to see if I can get away with getting a gun to run well at a low reg pressure, 90, 100 bar on an FX with a reserve, the power plenum, and something like Trevor's Maverick.
That's the thing with bigger plenums, is it allows you to do some of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Well, should we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Anything to add there?
No, I think that one's done.
Yeah, that was a good one.
At this pace, we'll be here, 6-7 hours.
We might not be able to do 15. So either two things are going to happen. We're going to learn how to go quicker. I told you guys I met my match with detail oriented when it comes to PJ, and he just sees stuff that I forget about or don't see. And that's why I'm so glad we're doing this together. So the next one comes from the Air Venturi Avenger setup guide, and Ryland Man writes, Did your Avenger have regulator? Did your Avenger have regulator creep? Question mark.
I have 2 Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
I have one in 177. One of the like pretty early on. And so I've had that since they came out. No issues with that one. And I also have the Avenger Bullpup.
Mm-hmm. Look at that, guys. Not many of those in circulation yet.
Well, I think today is the day they are officially out there, and this one has been rock solid as well. Now it's sat for a while and has had a fair amount of shooting through it, but I haven't seen any problems with the regulator.
So to answer your question, Ryland man. So you saw this video and my other one, of course, I'm sure, hopefully. And my first gun did have regulator creep, and I warrantied it out and got a replacement. And what I was seeing was, now everyone has a different idea of regulator creep. Okay. I, as a reviewer, see regulator creep. I have never seen a brand where I haven't seen regulator creep. Let me just say that. And what I mean by that is you take a shot, you wait 15 minutes, and if there's a regulator pressure gauge, you're 2 or 3 bar higher than where you were 1 minute after taking that shot. And I've seen that across like every brand, every gun, and I've also seen it not translate to a velocity difference. Or if it does translate to a velocity difference, it's like 5 feet per second, and it probably doesn't matter. Now on my Avenger, my first one, like overnight, it would increase like 25 bar.
Yeah, so I knew that's problematic.
Yeah, so that was a problem. So I warrantied that one out, and then the one that I got to do the review with was great for like the thousands of pellets through the review. It's been great for the last year. I am seeing in it what I see in all the other brands, which is I'll take a shot and, you can see where that regulator is. You wait 15, 20 minutes, it's a little bit higher. Take another shot, but the velocity is the same. So I don't consider that regulator creep, but yeah, my first one did.
Yeah, and in some of those, so I'm in a northern state. So I got, for my Maverick, I got one of the Sekhmet gauges, and I have that on the regulator. Yep. And that's, you can legitimately see if there's a couple of bar difference. Like you can
see a bar difference.
Right. On a needle gauge, unless I have my cheaters on,
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, there's a needle in there somewhere. Like,
yeah, you know how I deal with modern day needle gauges? One of these.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm like, if this is the gun, I'm like, no, where the hell is that gauge? That's what makes that Sekhmet so damn awesome.
Yeah, you just touch it and you got the number. But if I took the Maverick outside, and I was stalking around,
mm-hmm.
and then I took a shot, right? The regulator is going to fill up, but it's going to fill up based on pressure with cold air.
Yeah.
Now I come inside, that air is going to warm up, and that pressure is going to rise.
Yep.
So it is.
So maybe he's seeing that. You're thinking maybe
outside today.
Mm-hmm.
So if I went out for 20 minutes to, shoot a squirrel, do whatever I'm doing outside.
Mm-hmm.
I cycle a rifle. I come back in. I mean, eventually, even if I don't shoot, the air in the plenum is going to cool. It's going to signal the regulator, hey, we're dropping pressure here because it's cooling down, not because there aren't enough molecules in there or any air actually gone. It's simply going to, because PV equals NRT, it's going to drop that pressure and it's going to let some more through. And now I'm going to come in and it's going to go up to, 65 degrees or whatever it is down here in my workshop. And that pressure is going to rise within that cylinder because you've got a temperature shift of 30 or 35 degrees.
So what you're saying, PJ, is you want to make sure that the audience understands the difference between that and regulator creep.
Right, because the same thing could happen in sunny southern Florida where all of a sudden the gun is sitting in the sun.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Look like all of a sudden it looks like, oh, my reg is up from what now it's heating and cooling, and that's changing
Hmm.
the pressure inside that fixed volume cylinder.
That's a great point. And as long as we're deep diving on this, there's also the phenomenon when you take your shot, you're going to see the reg lose all its pressure, and then your gun has to take a breath. Your gun's
Yep.
lungs have to, and you're going to see that air come up back up on that regulator gauge. And as all those little discs and springs and stuff that are part of that regulator kind of settle over, it could be a minute, depending on the gun and the tune. You're going to see that it could be a minute before it really kind of just starts to sit somewhere.
And like, I don't think we don't sense this, right? We think things that happen instantaneously. Personally, I love guns with a plenum because I actually love that noise. I love plenum refilling noise. Like, it
sounds like a turbo, doesn't it? It's like,
yeah, you can tell it's like all of a sudden the gun has become a living, breathing thing because
it's so cool.
But all of those parts, because that air is changing pressures, are changing temperatures. Mm-hmm. And to a very small extent, because they're small parts and because the temperature changes aren't great, but those parts are actually changing in size.
That makes sense.
Because they're, that those materials aren't, I mean, they use materials that are as stable as possible, but it's metal in a lot of cases, and metal changes size with temperatures. Yeah. So all that's happening, in this very local spot where all that stuff is going on, there's going to be some variations. I
love your message.
There's a lot of great regulator manufacturers out there. Mm-hmm. They are all going to be somewhat susceptible to temperature changes, and the pressure isn't going to be absolutely perfect every time. I think even with the electronic guns by Daystate, they have to do other things to compensate for tiny variations because environmental factors are changing. And for a Daystate, unless they're also measuring temperature, what are you going to do?
I love your message where that you could just see a zillion reasons why you're going to see some changes.
Right.
At the end of the day, you don't want to see a 25 bar change overnight.
I think that's a problem.
Yeah, you don't want to see a huge fluctuation in velocity for shot number one. It's 5 feet per second, no big deal. It could be 25 feet per second, and it could or could not be a big deal.
Nope.
The accuracy is going to tell you when you check it at 50 yards, but yeah, it's a complicated thing, to your point, and a lot of different levels.
Like for some of us on that first shot, think about your environmental concerns or conditions. If you're going from a hot environment to a cold environment, or it's cold outside, now you're going to, you are going to a range after work, your gun's been sitting in the car all day, it's been cold, mm-hmm. So the gun is cold, now you go into the warm room.
Changes.
You get that high shot or that hot shot, the first one, because that plenum has adjusted to 30 and now it's back up to 65, and there's just stuff that's going to happen like that.
That ain't broke creep. That's just creep.
That's just what happens.
You ready for another one?
I am.
All right. So this is from the FX Crown Continuum Setup Guide. It's from Zdenek Oldrich Marek. Sorry, buddy, if I got that wrong. What is your aim in all this work? If you buy a BSA, the factory will deliver you a nicely set up rifle, will they not? You can then go out and shoot straight anyway, ? My Hatsan SAS 95 was really nicely set up, but to improve upon its accuracy, it can be tuned. I get the feeling you are suffering from too much quote unquote gun, having too many options. Oh, exclamation point. For the simple life. Well done. You explained the mechanics of UFX very well, and I enjoyed the expedition. Thank you, but please get yourself a basic type spring rifle so you can go out and enjoy the shooting without getting dissatisfaction of your rifle not being set up to optimum state. Be blessed. And I think his message is to the audience, because my audience knows I've reviewed probably 10 brake barrels over the last 5 years, and I am into that. But I think he brings up a valid point. Not everybody wants to tune
Right.
an air gun.
I would say that most of the people I'm friends with don't want to tune an air gun. That
Yeah.
are my air gunner, like local, the people I shoot with locally.
Mm-hmm.
I probably am the one who gets the opportunity to to tune their guns if they think they're not doing something, or if they want to make a change in something. Um, I'm more likely to be asked to help them out. And I have lots of friends who I know how much they're gonna, want to be part of things, and I've recommended purchases that were guns that absolutely don't even have tuning options, because they're either level of interest, or we always talk about deep dives and stuff like that. Where they're going to go with the sport is going to be, I just want something reliable that I can enjoy. And there are lots of manufacturers that make that gun.
There are. So I think that that's a really good point that you hit on there, PJ. But I have some thoughts as well. It's like, and I sometimes lose a healthy perspective of my audience. I feel like,
Mhm.
I feel like most people shoot an air gun out to 50 yards. I feel like that would be the normal air gunner. And then there's a select crowd which are now trying, well, for a decade have been pushing that to 100, and now we're trying to make 200 work, and so on and so forth. And I think that I want my message to the audience to be that, yes, absolutely, you can buy an air gun that's very high quality, that is not tunable, that will perform admirably at 50 and 100 yards. Plenty good enough to hunt. The thought I have is what I've learned over the last 5 years, is that in a 2 or 3 or 4 mile an hour wind, a pellet, let's call it a pellet or slug, at a given speed will perform admirably. But then when the wind changes to, say, 5 to 10, it can do a couple of different things. If it's going too fast, the pellet or slug, that increase in wind can start, or if there's a twist rate that it doesn't like, that increase in wind can start to destabilize that projectile. Same thing if you switch to a projectile and now a different weight projectile, now your velocity is too high or too low for that given wind condition. You lose that 50 and 100 yard performance. So I think what I'm trying to say is, yeah, a lot of air guns will work very well at long ranges, but with a very specific pellet or slug traveling at a very specific speed that the factory set it up for, that will work in a very specific wind condition, whether it's coming at you, blowing away from the sides. But as soon as you get into all of that other real world, when you're trying to reach out, the tuning for me, I've learned, becomes so critical in stabilizing that projectile to work in the wind.
Yeah, and then a lot of those rifles, I mean, if you ask me, the simple answer to the question of, hey, I'm going out shooting, it's a little windy today, I want to make sure I'm hitting my target, right? Other than doing a little quick proofing when you get out there to know what that wind push is, I would tell you to slow your gun down.
For sure.
The downside of many of the guns that are just beautifully set up from the factory and ready to go is they don't give you that option to do that. There's like no simple way to, without affecting the beautiful tuning and harmonics that are there. And in this case, I'm talking about the harmonics of the hammer spring and the valve and the regulator pressure, or what you've got identified as your shots. It's an unregulated gun.
Yeah.
You take a Benjamin Marauder, which is a great gun, you're not going to wind up knocking that power down for this afternoon because you want to bring that pellet speed down to 840 feet per second.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the BSA line. I would like to know more about the BSA line because I always look at their guns and I'm like, that's cool. And I love the British history and I love how long that company's been in business. And I think they make some beautiful rifles.
They absolutely do.
But I've just never had the opportunity. I wonder if I have one and it's shooting 890, which, like you say, is a great speed for a particular pellet in relatively calm conditions.
With a certain twist rate.
Right. Now that, but nobody's doing anything you can change twist rates on barrels, but I don't know anybody, Steve, who goes out shooting is like, well, I'm going to grab a different liner. And when I get out to the field, I'm going to change that.
Yeah, that's not what I meant to say, though. But what I meant to say is,
like, you can't change a BSA twist rate.
Yeah, no, I might have misspoke as far as what I was trying to convey. But if I buy a BSA, I own that twist rate.
Yes, 100%.
That twist rate is governing me for the rest of my life.
Yep. And
that twist rate is going to like a pellet or slug at a certain speed.
Yep.
In a given wind condition. And so the factory, they can't anticipate every elevation, every elevation, every speed, every condition for every customer.
And you can't build a gun like that.
It's impossible, exactly. So they built the gun they set up the gun to be successful. Probably 822 cal would probably be 850 feet per second with a 16 to 18 grain pellet, and that's all well and good. But then you're going to deal with 3 or 4 inches of drift at 50 yards and a 5-mile-an-hour wind, and 6 to 8 inches of drift at 100 yards in that same wind, which is fine. We can all compensate for that. But then when the wind comes from behind us and in front of us, I've seen it make that pellet in that perfectly awesome hammer forged BSA barrel do one of those things, and it's like, where the hell did that come from? And then I've missed. So I think the whole takeaway is, to answer his question, there's that over in this bucket. And then there's this new bucket over here, which is kind of creeping into the industry, where if you're having challenges, you can set that gun up to win in literally like whatever condition. Instead of having to buy a different gun. So now you have 2 guns or 3 guns or 4 guns and 5 guns to be well in all of these different circumstances.
Unless you want to.
Exactly. Or you could just be mentally ill like PJ and I.
Right,
we like puzzles, right?
Yeah.
and you want something like every airgun review I do is like a big puzzle. And that's what draws me to it. I like the puzzle. They're always like, what's your favorite gun? I'm like, the one I haven't reviewed, because that's the puzzle I haven't figured out yet. In every puzzle, you learn something new.
Here's the question for you, Steve, and I think this gets to the viewer's question. TX200 or HW97?
Oh gosh, you know how many times I've been asked that?
I just asked it now, so at least one more.
I have both in my closet.
Okay.
I like the trigger and the stock better on the TX200. But on the HW95 or the HW97, either of those, I feel like the power, the shot cycle, the accuracy, it's identical. So to me, they're both great guns. You just have to, it's what you can find for the price that you're comfortable with. Those are the 2 Porsches as far as I'm concerned. But could I pick one? No. Do I think that the trigger and the stock is nicer on the Air Arms? Yeah.
Okay.
But as far as what, at the end of the day, when I'm out there using it, does it matter which one I have? No. Because they're both going to put the pellets in the same place at 25 and 50 yards and at the same power and speed.
So if I stop by and we're going to go do a bit of shooting, which one are you handing me?
Probably the HW97, so you don't mess up my nice stock on my Air.
All right. Fair answer.
Yeah, that was a good question. I get that one a lot. That
I mean,
HW97.
I don't
Right?
do a ton of Springer stuff, so I actually in the like, if the question were, is there a gun you'd like to have some time with?
Yeah,
I would like to have some time with that, the TX 200, and I think it's the Hunter carbine version that
they're amazing.
you can put a moderator on that pretty easily.
Yeah,
I'd like to have an opportunity to have a play with one of those, as the Brits might say.
they're great. They I'll tell you what. There's a big crowd of people over there that don't believe that precharged pneumatics are hold sensitive, and getting good at shooting a Springer will make you damn good at shooting a PCP. Yeah. That's all I got to say about that. Otherwise, we're going to get too far off topic.
Everything's hold sensitive.
Yeah.
Everything.
Great question. So you snuck one in there. You got one ahead. You got PJ. You got one ahead of Jay Sartrine.
Sorry, Jay.
But yeah. But do you feel like we answered that pretty good on?
Oh yeah, I think
on those two buckets of.
And I think the answer is in your end. There's also the bit that's what companies are asking you to do, and from my perspective, because I've been watching you for a long time, you're the service you provide to those of us who have a passion for air gunning is that you're bringing us information that we don't have an opportunity to get.
Oh, well, thank you.
We don't live in the UK where there are gun shops in every village and town, or at least that's the way it appears from here in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Realistically, if I want to see an air gun, if I want to know something about it, talk to somebody, like I could drive to Ohio and go to Baker Airguns. And we do have an airgun store in Wisconsin, but it's a very small, Trenier Outdoors. It's a very small stuff. I know
Trenier, sure.
Oh, because you do some Optizon stuff, and Jeff worked at that.
Yeah, he's the hub. He's the distributor.
But he doesn't have a lot of hours, so it's a challenge to get over there. And he's actually in Sparta, which you can't get here from there. I think it's part of the mystique. It's get on an airplane and go out to Utah, or go see Ken Hicks down and like. For most of us in the States, most of us are not close to an airgun store. Well, so the ability for the average, at least American, to go to a place and talk to somebody who's knowledgeable about really deeply how an air arms rifle works, or an Avenger, or any of those things, your option is to go, and you're not the only channel out there, but you certainly, on the rifles that you bring in, or that are sent to you, or whatever you want to call it.
I would love to talk about that when you're done with that thought.
You go way deeper into detail than anybody else does, and so keep doing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I mean, you've remarked to me, like, I can't believe you watched that whole thing. Yeah, I watch every one of them.
That's amazing to me.
Because, I don't get something from every minute. I get something out of every video that I watch. And
sure.
Some of them are like, whoa, that was totally eye-opening. I wouldn't have thought of doing that. Some of them are like, okay, I feel like I'm on the right track with what I'm doing on that. But there's always something there. And I think if we don't have access to channels like yours, where we are actually getting a little bit below the surface on things, we're not as smart as we can be taking advantage of watching a video. Well, I hope that this one turns out to be that way, but certainly, the tuning guides, I mean, the reviews are great, but I live for the tuning guides, because
thank you.
There's a lot more information there.
I appreciate that.
And this is just a good format for us to get access. And if you're able to, to do your thing because you're successful doing this, that's phenomenal. And I hope that continues out into the future.
Well, thank you. And I definitely have some thoughts about that. It's, I looked at, when I got my start with this, I looked at the Airgun YouTube playing field, and I was like, well, I'm not funny like Giles, so I'm not going to try to be that. I'm not an airgun hunter like Matt or Ted or Gerard, so I'm not going to try to, do that. But I am detail oriented, and one of my strengths is process and digging deep and solving puzzles. So I'm like, well, maybe I can offer something there. And that's what I do. I kind of, people are like, well, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And And I feel like, to be successful as a YouTuber, because it's hard, guys. It's really, really hard. You have to be really resilient and really tough. I feel like the success is to do what you want to do. I mean, certainly listen to your audience and give them what they want, but do what you want to do, and then you'll find your tribe, and the people that, listen to you, it'll all be good. But to kind of get all the way back to what you were saying with the guns that you see come through AEAC, and this gentleman here is like, well, why not a BSA? Well, I personally love BSA. Like 4 or 5 years ago, I reviewed the R10 Mark II. And that gun, I love that gun. But the reality of my world, guys, is quarterly, I send out an invitation to the entire airgun industry. I know some of you are frustrated. Why don't you review this? And why don't you review that? And how come you only do these? And you won't review the guns that I like. I literally, without discrimination and any bias, and completely openly, all except for maybe 1 or 2 brands I can think of. I don't say yes to all of them, but all of them get an invitation quarterly. So a lot. And a very small handful of them come back. And you guys know the circle. It's Daystate, it's Brocock, it's FX, it's Air Arms. It was Hatsan, it's not anymore. It was Air Force Raw, it's not anymore. It's a lot of other companies that, Crawl Arms, they have a big interest now, and you're going to see RTI, and of course Air Venturi, and there's a lot, and Viro and Diana. Really, but there's a lot of companies that come back and we're like, hey, we love what you're doing. We love what you're doing for the community and the industry, and we want to be a part of what you're doing. What can we do to help? And then there's other companies that is like, it's totally crickets. So that's a big part of it. So for those of you who haven't seen the brand or the gun that you want to see yet, I apologize. I'm extending the invitations. Airgun's a perfect example. They were very I don't know, for a lot of years. Now they're very interested and they want to really be involved with what I'm doing, So,
well, and those folks are in it. Those folks are running a business, right? So at some points, you're going to align with their business goals and objectives, and then there's going to be times where you don't. It's not that you're doing good or bad stuff. It's just what direction are they going? I think you're subject to some of those things. I think, right?
Well, to be fair, if I'm an airgun company, AEAC is not for everybody.
Right.
When it comes to these companies, a lot of these guns are designed to be pretty good for the masses. And I think if I were an airgun company, I'd be pretty nervous about our gun's doing well. A lot of people like it. It's working well for a lot of people. I feel like it takes a lot of courage to take an airgun that you've invested literally millions in and send it off to some YouTuber that you don't know from Adam and be like, pick my gun apart and tell everyone what you thought was great about it and tell everyone what you thought it could have been. Dude, you can sink a brand.
Yeah.
And so if I'm an airgun company, I'm not sending something off to Steve at AEAC unless I have a lot of confidence in him really going through it and sharing with the world literally what it is. And I mean that world literally. Half my audience is here in the States and the other half are in 300 countries spread across the country. So it's just AEAC isn't for everyone, and I'll be the first to admit that and understand it and be good with it. So
there's also probably only so many reviews you can do at any given time.
Yeah, I do. About 10 a year is the max.
You put a lot of time and work into it.
I do. I try to give each gun a full month. Before I get in front of the camera, I want to have the confidence that I know that gun inside and out and backward and forward so that I can have 100% confidence that what I'm putting out on YouTube, which is forever, are the same results that the audience is going to get in their product. If the results are different, then either there's something different in their shooting, they got a different barrel, they got a different gun, the thing's broke, whatever, which I don't have that problem with. You look at the comments and the videos, and the experience I have is the same experience that the audience has. Sure, there's always some that when it comes along and calls me a liar because they had a different one, but it just is what it is. It's just part of it.
Well, I mean, I pay attention to what you post on Instagram. I always know what you're working on. And, it's like, oh, he's got that gun. and then it'll be like 10 days of of nothing.
Yeah,
but
Instagram and
I can see when you're in the backyard on Instagram shooting across the pool, and like you're doing all that stuff. If you guys at home aren't following along on Instagram, you know what he's working on, and you can see the kind of even if you didn't study, which I don't study your Instagram, I'm not a stalker, but it's obvious to me how much time you put into each of those reviews. It's a significant investment of time, and it's your business, so it's diligence. You should be doing that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I want to do about 10 a year. I want to learn them backwards and forwards, so that, because at the end of the day, my audience isn't, if they don't believe what I'm telling them, it's a lot of people. I think 84,000 people now, whatever, on the other channel. This is the baby channel if you're new around here. I have nothing without them. Nobody listens to what I have to say, then I'm worth nothing to them and nothing to the industry. So I'm honest. Whether I liked it and whether I didn't like it, I'm honest. And there's some questions about that in here that we should probably roll on to.
Just, where I sit is I'm on the other sides of that spectrum. My interest when I do a gun review, I like to show people what they're going to get out of the box. I like first impressions. Especially if I can get my hands on something that is new to the market. And then if I'm going to do a long-term review, I think probably the one I'm probably most proud of was after I'd had the Maverick for 4 months, and I'd been shooting it, pretty much every day for 4 months, and really had figured it out. So I think what you do is great. Just what I do winds up being on the other ends of it.
But you can speak to what I'm saying, you have confidence in front of your audience that you've learned that gun backwards and forwards. So what you're speaking is what is.
Right.
And if the experience is different than they have, well, there's something you missed.
And by the time I've worked a gun that long, if there was something that was bugging me, either I'd stop shooting that gun, to be honest with you, or I'd have made a replacement on something, like here's an area where you're going to want to buy the accessory part.
Oh, sure.
It was interesting on the Catron where you were like, when you order this, get the bag rider.
Spend that $50 damn.
And it's stuff like that would have saved somebody some aggravation.
Sure. It was a difference maker.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was 100%. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, buddy.
Next question, man.
Okay. Next question. So this was on the Omega turbocharger 4,500 PSI compressor review that I did a few years back. Jay Sartrine, hopefully I said that right, says, are you still using this air compressor today? And if not, which one are you using? I'm going to try to there it is. You see it? It's right there. There's it's 46 and a half hours on it, and it's still going strong.
That's a good run. That's
the Omega turbocharger before it was the supercharger. I had like 25, 26 hours on the supercharger, and then I sold it for this, and I haven't had a lick of problem with either of them. But I follow the instructions and I do the maintenance like I'm supposed to do, and turn the little grease knobs, and I'm not mean to them, and there are things you can do that's harder on your equipment, whatever.
You can fill a tank on that one, right? Like a big tank?
Oh yeah, it's 4 SCBA tanks primarily.
I use the Hill compressor.
Oh, sure. There's a lot of good compressors out there.
Yeah, primarily for just filling right to the gun.
Yeah.
We'll do a small, like the guppy size bottle. But it's been bulletproof. I love it. I think run it multiple times every week.
Yeah, Hill makes a great compressor. There's a lot of good brands as far as I'm concerned. If it can keep up with me, I'm not commercial use, but I'm probably darn near close to it.
You got to be pretty close to that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like an airgun shop, but it's a good product. But yeah, I love the Omega. I would tell anyone to go out and buy one. It's a good product, good warranty, good backing by a company that's been around forever.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I want there to be somebody I can talk to, and I don't care if it's an email or whatever.
Yeah.
But I want to know it is backed by a company that is accessible, like within, and I am not a, it must be made in the United States kind of person. We're global, but I want there to be an American-based company connected to the compressor, so I don't have to ship it overseas if there's a problem with it.
Sure. Yeah, you don't want to have to ship one of these things anywhere if there's a problem, because they weigh about 100 pounds and it's going to cost you about $100,000. And UPS is almost certainly going to break it, so you're better off getting the parts and fixing it yourself. And they're fixable. But people do ship them. They ship them back to get fixed. They do it all the time. Are you still using the compressor today? And if so, yeah, I'm using that today exclusively. That's what I've been using since I reviewed it a few years back to run my channels. And I haven't had a hiccup. Well, here's another one from FX Maverick Setup Guide. This is Michael Grisenti. Michael Grisenti writes, "Thanks for this great video, Steve! Exclamation point. How do I find the point you called internal hammer spring 0? I lost the position because of too much turning of the adjustment screw." We've all done that, buddy. You're in good company there. "The shot strings are now jumping around 30 feet per second up and down, and the velocity just isn't consistent anymore. Totally normal when you lose that balance of those opposing forces. Your hammer spring is not happy with the reg pressure setting. So you got to change one of them to get that flatness back in the shot string. Have you an idea how to find the perfect harmony between reg and hammer spring? Thanks for any help." Let me start this one off and say, so Michael, if you leave this YouTube channel and go to my other one, AEAC Home, I did a full review of the Maverick. And in that Maverick, I modified the shot charts that you're seeing here in that you saw in that vlog to show the actual internal hammer spring measurements in millimeters for each one of those tunes. I think it was an eco tune, a power tune, a pro tune, and a slug tune, if I remember, for different barrels. But I put it in there for you. Now, I know I could.
Right. You put like a pin in there, pulled it out and measured it, right? That was how you.
No, I pulled out the actual bell.
Oh, okay.
And there's an adjustment screw on the end of the bell. And I took the measurement in millimeters of how far that micro screw
was sticking out.
Because you could screw it all the way in.
Yep.
And then you start backing it out. And I took those actual measurements in millimeters. Now, that being said, and I'm surprised that PJ hasn't scolded me and slapped my wrist yet, it's not how you tune an air gun. I put that in there because I had so many of you guys being like, "I'm lost and I need to get back home." That should get you close, but that's not how you tune an air gun successfully defined, right?
Right. What you want to look at is a regulator pressure that is going to allow you to start with one and see consistent. What I would be doing if I were setting up a gun that like maybe came used, right?
Why don't we say his gun?
Yeah.
If you were setting up his gun.
If I was setting up his gun, does
his
it
Maverick.
say what caliber or what barrel it is?
No, but I think it would be the same basic philosophy as
I would set the. This is what I would do. I would.
Tell me what you do. Tell me what you do, and then I'll share what I'd do.
So I would take.
All right, hold on.
Shooting range.
I'm going to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
So that I don't hear what you're going to say.
Sounds good.
And then I'm going to come back. This should be really good.
All right.
So if you got a brand new gun and you're all over the place.
Yeah, it's all over the place, right? So I would open up the shooting reg so it's out of the way entirely. And I would then take the bottle reg and I would turn that down. This is a little bit depending on your caliber, but if I were doing a 22, I would set it at about 80 bar. And then I would turn that hammer spring in, so you're reducing the preload on that cam wheel. And I would start at power 1, and I'd shoot a couple, then I'd go to power 2, and I'd shoot a couple, and I'd see, what I want to see is the velocity climbing all the way to 7. If it's still climbing up to 7, then I'd go back to 1. I'll go to that dead spot. I would give myself a little bit more, maybe a quarter turn at this point. I'd give it a little bit more turn, and I would go through that process again. And I would keep going until I got to a place where 7 plateaus. So 6 and 7 are shooting at the same velocity. And then I would shoot a string there, and I would look at, is that velocity consistent? And at that point, from my opinion, you have balanced the hammer spring and the regulator. Now, if that's at your target velocity, if that's where you want to be and you've got a nice range, then I don't know that you need to play with it anymore. You can use the dial to get to the velocity you want to shoot. If that's way under the mark, then you can start moving your regulator pressure up and then see if you're still on that curve. And if you get to the place where, hey, 5, 6, and 7 are all the same speed, or 5 and 6 are the same and 7 actually drops off, that's too much hammer spring for that. If you're still climbing, then you can afford to add more hammer spring to it. But you want to work them up together in small increments till you get to the place where you want to be. Now, if I've got a target velocity of, let's say, 900 feet per second, I'm probably going to try and have 900 feet per second be like 5. That way I can goose it up just a little bit if I get a wild hair and I want to do that. And I can back it off, which I think is super useful if you go out in high winds, because Steve's talked about this before. When a pellet is traveling too fast with a little bit too much twist, sometimes you get this precession where the skirt kind of kicks out, and that's where you start to get spiraling. So I want to be able to have an air gun where if I go out and it's like, okay, now the wind's kicking up 12 miles an hour, I actually reduce my velocity. And I'm able, yeah, I got to hold off, but my pellets are going consistently and stably in the same place. So that's how I would address that issue. And I'm curious to hear how Steve, he's going to actually have to wait till he sees this to hear about all the things I was talking about.
Yeah, for me, it's really simple. If a buddy hands me a gun and says it's all over the place, the first thing that jumps in my mind is, what caliber is it? If it's a 22 cal, let's just grab a number. I say, okay, a 22 cal likes a pellet typically between 840 and 910 feet per second, maybe 920. Let's call it 840. So I know that that's my target window of the velocity I want to be in if I'm going to shoot an 18 to a 25 grain. Let's call it in 22. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I want to be in that velocity. So experience teaches me with his gun, it was the Maverick, right? Yeah, it was a Maverick. Experience teaches me that with really most any gun, in this FX lineup, that, all right, it's 22 cal, I need to be 850 to 900. Regulator probably wants to be somewhere between 100 and 120. So I'm just grabbing a number out of the air. I always start at the bottom, work my way up. I'm going to start at a regulator of 100 bar. I'm going to back all that hammer spring stuff way out. I'm going to get the cam on number 7, because that cam and that internal hammer spring, they're just a function of one another. And like I said before, I'm going to fill it up to like 200, 210 bar. I'm going to shoot, see where I'm at with, like, let's say that 18 grain. And I'm going to slowly start working up on the hammer spring tension until I see that 18 grain move into the 860, 870, somewhere in there. If I'm shooting a redesign, I want that more like 900, 910, probably. Unless it's windy and I'm backing it off to 850. It could be all over the place. But that's the methodology, and I shoot, see where I'm at, and I get into that target velocity of where I want to be, and then I start fine-tuning that hammer spring. I'm not moving half turn, quarter turn at a time. I'm moving an eighth of a turn. And I try to get that SD and ES nice and tight. And then I got to go out and try it. You know, I've honed in on this 870 with an 18 grain, or I've honed in on this 910 with a 24 grain. I got to go out and see how it works at 50 and 100 yards, and it's either going to work or it's not. It's either going to work or it'll work great in a 3-mile-an-hour wind, and then the wind's 7, and then it stops working. It starts, whoa. And if it starts, whoa, I got too much speed. You know, I got to back off the speed typically. So that's my approach.
You came back and there's one thing I forgot.
Oh, and there's one more thing that you saying that made me remember.
So you go with yours first, and I'll go back to mine.
Okay, sounds good. And if I didn't like the results of that, I'll go back and maybe I'll bump that reg pressure to 110 from 100, and I'll do the whole thing all over again. And another little trick that I've learned is once you think you have this perfect shot chart, bump up that regulator pressure 2, 3, 4 bar, maybe something like that. And it tends to have like a stabilizing force on the hammer, because the valve has to work harder to overcome and get into that area of higher pressure. Tends to make things work a little bit quicker, and it really kind of helps to fine tune that last little bit of accuracy. Because when the pellet comes out, you don't have any extra air coming with it. You have just enough to kind of get it to the end of the bore. And it's almost like it spits and like doesn't gulp back, but you almost want like a little bit of a low pressure area right when it comes out, because that air coming around it really tends to funk things up, in my experience. And that's why the tunable guns are so great, because you can get it right there.
Right.
And that's why you see these guys doing like 20 shots at 100 yards, and they all go in like 3/4 of an inch. And everyone else is going, well, how the hell did they do that? They get a special gun. They get a special barrel. They get special pellets. They found the sweet spot.
So on mine, once you have a decision made on what that regulator pressure is, you then have to set the shooting regulator to that pressure, bleed the system, back your other regulator off to where you want it. You have to go through that process of the
dual sure.
Dual
Why don't you cover? You want to cover that real quick?
I talked about it in mine.
Okay, like good enough. What he said.
How I use it to tune. So
yeah.
You'll see it when you check the video.
All right. I like about 30 bar between the regs.
Yeah.
No more, no less. If I go to 2, if I go much less, it works fine, but it takes too long to refill its lungs between the shots. If you get down around 20, 25 works good. 30, I feel like stabilizes it, make things happen a little bit quicker. I've never had a need to get into 35, 40, 45 bar between the, 30s work.
Oh, I start to think about, you could go 50 bar. But the difference between 50 bar and 30 bar is 20 bar, and those are shots you could be taking on that fill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You set it too high, and all of a sudden, well, now I'm only going from, if you have like what I would consider high reg pressure on like a Maverick, I've got it set at 145. If you had it at 145, and that other one is 25 bar, now that's at 170. And all of a sudden, I only have 80 bar to shoot, because the tank's only 250. So
yeah, and you know what's interesting?
25 is my target.
25 is your target. You've told your story, I've told mine, but then you look at the events where the big money is on the line. And I remember 2 years back, or was it last year, Ken Hicks. He took like a second at the extreme bench rest, and he's running like 50 bar difference between the regs. And then Nikolai Boldoff, who took first, and then I don't know, he was like a second or third or something at I can't remember if it was ZBR or RMAC, whatever, it doesn't matter. But his first reg was just totally open. So the air was flowing right through it into the second reg, and the second reg was just doing all the work. And so God save us, who knows what the right answer is? There may be multiple right answers.
I think that's the key. And I do think there are a couple of schools of thought on, some of these tuning issues. There are definitely tuners who advocate, nope, you want a high reg pressure, so it's slamming that valve shut after the shot goes off. And there are other guys who are like,
Justin Welch says that.
we want to run that regulator as low as possible so everything is relaxed, and it's like, you know, surfer dude versus, you know,
Formula One race car driver.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just two different schools of thought. I don't know that either of them are wrong. I know that I tend to go towards the lower reg pressure, and you know what's like my Maverick, I'm shooting 906 and the reg pressure's at 84 or 88 bar is what set at. And that's with the compact. And it's, you know,
Well,
I
it brings us back to night.
and it's dead quiet and it's super accurate. And
it brings us back, PJ, to an hour ago where we were discussing, I'm starting to get this picture of a shift in thinking. What's really important is the interface between the pellet slug and the barrel and the harmonics. That's what's making stuff go straight, or at least that's a big part of it. And all this other stuff, there's lots of ways to get to the dance. I don't know, but that's kind of where I'm going with it in my head.
yeah.
Yeah, but time will tell because people will get this figured out sooner or later. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. So this is on the Air Arms TX200 Mark III 177. Tina Milligan writes, and this isn't a question. I think they were more making a statement, and I'd love to hear your comments on it. Long barrel, better accuracy, physics tells us. That's all I said. I'm with you. I do better with the short ones, but go ahead.
So, wow, sorry, Tina. I disagree.
I disagree too.
So what you need a long barrel for in some cases is to get a projectile up to speed.
Using less air.
Using less air. So if we push to the limit of this is the most air this gun can dump, the barrel could be a limiting factor in how much velocity we can achieve.
And it often is in the compacts.
Yes.
Perfect example was the Catron compact that I just finished reviewing.
Yep. And there were great points. Like go watch that. There's your
homework. Go watch that. That gun was working its balls off to get an 18 grain to 820.
Yeah. And it wasn't efficient, and I don't think it was as pleasant a shooting experience as it might have been to shoot it a little bit slower. That's what I took from your
I found its efficiency to be actually very good for this little 300cc bottle, but at the same time, it was working so hard.
I guess I was comparing to Michael's results at a little bit lower speed.
Well,
that's
sure,
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, they detuned that gun, right. And it made it really just settled it down. Yeah. And it really helped with the turbulence. Like I got a lot of turbulence in a lot of different rounds, except for pretty much like the 16 and the 18 grain. Anything a 13, a 14, the Hades, I tried slugs, whatever. But that short barrel, that 280 millimeter barrel needed so much air to get those pellets up to speed that when that pellet came out, it had a big cough of air around it. So it really had a tendency to make the pellet do this, unless it was a 16 or 18 grain. Those heavier pellets for that 22 were able to kind of endure that disruption in flow as the pellet comes out. And it performed well at 50 and 100 yards with good efficiency. But the whole takeaway is it's a short range fighter because that short barrel really is going to just make everything work really hard, which can compromise accuracy.
Right.
With some pellets.
Now, if you get a well-balanced short barrel gun, they can be very accurate. And if you can hold a longer barrel gun steady, I mean, the challenge we have in
that's where my just head was
is the lock time of
dwell time. Oh,
you know, the amount of time that you have to hold that gun steady as compared to a powder burner, you know, which is out and gone. You know, I won't say exponentially slower, but we're substantially slower. And because we're operating at a lower pressure as compared to a firearm, it takes proportionately more volume of air to get that projectile out and moving through the barrel. So, you know, we've got, you know, that firearm is like that, and we're like that.
That's that hold
which
sensitivity I'm
means
always talking
you're
about.
gonna have to hold that gun steady the whole time that pellet's in the barrel, and any little variation in your form, any lack of follow through, any coming off the scope too soon,
Yeah.
all those things are going to be your enemy. There are some rifles where, because you put a longer barrel on it, you can achieve a little more velocity with a little less, I got to have the highest pressure. I'm sure there are some guns out there that, like, we could say, yeah, the slightly longer barrel makes that gun a little more accurate, but it's not because the barrel is longer. It's because a longer runway gives the projectile something it can do that it can't do out of the short runway.
Yeah, I want to mirror what you said, and I want to be really clear. I envy these professional shooters that are competing at these events and doing really well with these like 700 millimeter barrels. Like, what comes to mind all the time is Justin Welch for some reason. He really likes to shoot 850, 860 with a 700 millimeter barrel, I think. And I don't know if people realize how incredibly disciplined and trained you have to be in your control of your body and mind to do that well. Like, me personally, give me a 500 or 600 millimeter barrel shooting at 890 or 910, or give me like a 400 millimeter barrel, like in some of these bullpups. I'm better with that. It's so much easier to shoot well long because, to your point, you don't have all that dwell time of the pellet running down the bore while you're trying to hold the gun perfectly steady. Yeah, while you're trying to hold the gun perfectly steady, like a pellet moving through that thing at 850 feet per second, it takes a little bit before it leaves the business end.
This is my Crown, 380 barrel. I'm
gonna show you my Crown. Hold on one second, buddy. Go, keep talking.
My Crown with the 380, I am way, way more accurate with this gun than I am with the 700 millimeter barrel.
Yeah, look at my Crown.
Yeah.
I'm doing the same thing. You are. There's the two barrels.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm more accurate with this. I can be more careless with this.
Correct.
And still hit what I'm shooting at. Same thing with like the 400 millimeter bullpups and the various brand. Gun comes to mind.
Yep.
For a caliber gun comes to mind. These kinds of brands.
Well, look at the rifles that Olympic shooters are shooting. Those guys aren't shooting super long barrels. They're shooting like 13-inch barrels on some of those on-shoots. And
yeah, I mean, you got to be good. You really got to be good to hold that steady.
And especially on the Crown, because it's unsupported throughout the entire, it only interfaces with the gun at the back end. There's a lot of whip in that barrel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's just you have to be really disciplined to shoot it well.
Yeah. Here's another perfect example. This Maverick we keep talking so much about. I reviewed this. I can't remember. I know I did the 700 millimeter. Did I do the 600? I can't remember. I think I did the 5.6. I can't remember, but when I was done with that review, I put it right back into the compact form and retuned it again because I shoot better with a shorter barrel simply because I can be more careless.
So now here's my Maverick experience, right? I mean, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
Well, same name as my dog, so like that was key to its acquisition.
Yeah.
For RMAC, for the slug competition, I did get a 700 millimeter barrel and put it in there. I ran it with the small bottle because I wasn't going to change the bottle up.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, getting the longer barrel gave me the velocity I needed to shoot slugs successfully. And I took something that, like, it wasn't like in the money or anything, but for what I consider myself really not a slug shooter, 10th was I was very happy with how I performed, and my Maverick was perfect. Like, there is nothing I'm going to say, oh, if my gun would have done this, I would have been better. I shot great. It was something that was a new experience for me and something I pushed myself to be a part of, and I was really happy with where it turned out. But in that case, I needed the extra barrel length to get a velocity, and that extra 200 millimeters put me in a velocity with the NSA 28.5s, where that gun was shooting very stable, and it was great. It was awesome.
What we should probably leave the audience with, PJ, is the people that are competing and winning aren't shooting short barrels.
No.
They're shooting the long barrels. They are. And I think they're doing it because they can get their gun kind of relaxed, not have to run such high reg pressures, not have to run such high hammer spring tensions, and they're just good shooters. So there's a lot to be said for that as well. I'm going to put this away. I can see you're digging something up. So the takeaway.
Yeah, my 30 cal, Steve.
Yeah.
My reg pressure is 100 bar for my 30 cal.
So the takeaway isn't that shorter is better. I think they both have their merits. Certainly take to heart, I think, what PJ and I are telling you, but also recognize the people that are winning the big bucks with their shooting. And you're just going to have to find your own way. That's what I would say. Because I just don't want someone being like, oh, Steve said shorter's better. And then they get that and it doesn't work for them. I think you really just got to look at all the information and make a good choice for yourself.
Yeah, and especially if we're talking about pellets, a pellet stabilizes itself.
It wants to.
Drop a pellet out of an airplane or a helicopter or a hot
like a parachute.
It's going straight.
Yeah.
The pellet, all the barrel is doing is orienting it to a direction and giving it an opportunity to get to speed.
Yeah,
Unless it's imparting some weird cuts due to rifling or a bad crown or something like that. All it's doing is setting the direction and getting it to speed.
Yeah, and it's that boot out the barrel that can tend to disrupt it, which is why the tuning becomes so important. But the last comment I want to make on the readers or the viewers' observation is, for me, there's two big advantages to a longer barrel. The longer barrel requires less air to get up to the same speed as a short barrel, which also means that the shorter barrel requires more air than a longer barrel to shoot the same speed. So it comes down to efficiency, and the longer barrel really helps the gun settle down because it doesn't have to work so hard to get there. And that's important because of the excess air coming out around the pellet. It's going to further stabilize that load. That's where my thinking always is on this stuff.
And if we jump off that to something that I'm like, part of why I really love being part of Airguns is the quiet side of things. A really short barrel, especially as you get into higher calibers, is very hard to moderate.
Oh yeah, well they're loud no matter what.
So much air that you would need a Volkswagen size moderator to actually deal with. You see like, I've got this 50 caliber. Well, I've got a 35 caliber, basically pistol length, and I've got a big moderator on there, and the moderator takes it from I should really have hearing protection to I can shoot this comfortably, but nowhere near what I would consider backyard friendly.
It's another perfect example is that Catron Compact. Michael's was perfect. Michael's tuned to 20 foot-pounds was perfectly quiet with a Donnie Tatsu. Mine tuned to 24.5 foot-pounds was loud with a Ronin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just that point of diminishing returns. It's using so much more air to get like that 20% more oomph, and that's where the bigger barrels come into play, guys. And you just have to be honest with yourself. Am I going to shoot it at 50 yards? Am I going to shoot it at 100? Is 825 feet per second okay, or do I really need 875? It's a lot more complicated than what Tina's trying to say. Is all I'm trying to say. Not that I don't appreciate the question, but
no,
there's a lot more to it than that.
Conversation to have.
Yeah. Okay. This is a good one. This would be a good one for you, maybe. RMAC 2021 video. D writes, are there any budget classes in these competitions for us poor folks? That's a great question.
I know that in 2019, RMAC had I don't know if it was a separate class, like they were shooting separately, but they did have, I think they had a prize award for, and I don't remember what the cutoff was, but there was something for budget air guns. I think.
What's define a budget air gun? What's that
I'm
mean
trying to
to you?
remember what, I think it was like under $400 or something like that. Or maybe it was under $5. I don't remember if it got into accessories. I think the challenge, this is what I think the challenge is. And I'm going to talk about RMAC because that's the only competition I've been to. As a faculty member, I don't really get to travel once the semester starts, and unfortunately, EBR is always in October. So we're always in session, and the great thing about teaching is summer's off. The downside of it is you really can't pick and choose when your vacation is, right? So
You got replaced by Jason Barnes in October.
Yeah, exactly. So
you did a good job.
So when you look at the classes and you actually read the class descriptions, the pro class is for people who've like been in the money in sportsman's class and people who are in the industry. So I'm sorry if I said that wrong. The pro class is, yeah, I think I said it right. You've been in the money in sportsman or you're in the industry. So if you registered, I think everyone would say Steve's in the industry. You should be shooting pro class. Because there's $21,000 on the line for first place. Everybody wants to register pro class because that's where the big money is. Sportsman's class is meant for everybody. But I think a lot of people get drawn into the I want to go for the big prize. And I've heard people say, why shouldn't I go for the big prize? And I think, well, if that's your attitude, then you probably should. I think it would take like Justin and Austin saying, we want to open this up to different groups. And so we're going to set that aside. I think the challenge they're going to have to do that is they're almost out of space. I mean, they're selling out.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point there. Like Pyramid Air Cup, Extreme Bench Rest, Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge. There's usually about 150 seats on that line at the most. And they're always full as is. So I think maybe because our sport is kind of new, we're really in the infant stages of the air gunning thing when you compare it to powder burning. Maybe one day we'll get there. But that being said, I see Umarex gauntlets and Air Venturi Avengers competing at these events, and sometimes they're right there. And also I think of Extreme Bench Rest. Gosh, I forget the guy's name. He's so nice, and I feel bad for not remembering his name. But he brought like a 20-year-old Air Arms S400 and took like second place in speed silhouette by like 1/100th of a second.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's big money.
Yeah.
And so I think the message is,
right? He was single loading, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Yep, up against Tom Adams in his Daystate Red Wolf. But I think the message is, if you want to go, just go and have fun. And
I would.
You're going to see plenty of other shooters there. They're not going to get the press time, so you may not be seeing them in the videos as much. But there's a small fraction. Yeah, there's it's not a lot. You have 150 people. You might have 5 there with budget guns. But they're out there having fun, and so I would just encourage you to go. But I really haven't seen anything. EBR has indoor pistol. It has 25 meter. You see less expensive stuff there, but it's really the more expensive
some
stuff
of that
is
Piper stuff, like
Huh?
with the 25 meter. You see some of that, like, wow, that mechanical rest is more expensive than my gun, and
They absolutely are. You'll see a $2,500, $3,000 rest in a $1,800 air gun, but
Right.
I don't know. But I feel like the sport is getting away from that. I feel like it's like race cars where everyone's trying to get that performance edge.
I really feel,
No,
Steve, like we are in this in like the golden era of superbike racing, or I feel sometimes like there's this Ford versus Ferrari, thing where we're like, how exciting is it to be in it at the time
well, for
when
sure.
all these rapid innovations are happening,
Yeah.
and you can actually go to an event and really actually be a part of that kind of excitement. It's almost, well, yeah, almost intoxicating at times as to how cool it is that this stuff is going on
It is. We're,
right
we're,
now.
we're, we're drinking from a fire hose. If you're an air gunner, you're drinking from a fire hose. I tell people all the time, I feel like a mosquito in a nudist colony, and it's just like, where do you go? What do you do? Where do you spend your dollar? And that's why we do this. I mean, that's
The
why we
the
do
other thing
this.
I would say is in well, a lot of places there are more local and regional events, and if I was looking to try to be a part of something to get an event experience, I would not be afraid to think that you're missing out by going to local events, and in that way meeting people who are actually from your area.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and it
But
might take a little
I've been
digging
and
to find some of those.
they're
They're,
spending money too at the local
yeah,
events. I've been to those and yeah, it's not a lot of people, but trying to go there for inexpensive, but we must sound like a bunch of lunatics talking about a budget gun being $300-400. But that's another question I get all the time. That air guns have so many more parts in them, so many more moving parts to design and make work together and assemble, like 100 times more parts than like a firearm, powder burning firearm, and that's what makes them more expensive. And it's the scaling. The air gun industry is like just a fraction of a percent the size of the firearms industry. And so there's that too. And both of those things make it expensive.
yep.
Yeah. Well, we're at an hour and 37 minutes. Do you want to do a few more and try to make it an even two?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's hit it.
All right. FX Maverick Setup Guide. Kevin Wood, 44. Impact video coming soon? Question mark. I see you got something. Yes. I've requested the new Impact M3 for February, March timeframe from FX. So that's probably when they'll send it. I'm not sure if I'll get to it at that time. It'll probably be around that time. But yeah, they've offered and I've very enthusiastically said yes. And so that's when I've requested it for around then.
I'm looking
And
forward to your take on that.
thank you. And there will be a tuning guide too. They've ordered the full boat on that thing. And I'm sure you'll be doing a video or several videos of your own if you haven't already. So keep an eye to Wisconsin Air Gunners too for that.
Yeah, I think I have hoping to pull together a short video on changing. You can buy the M3 power wheel to replace your AB123 wheel, and I did that on my Mark II. And actually, there's one or two interesting things about that switchover. So I got a planned video. I took some stills and have to record some stuff, but that, and then I'll be doing some video on my road with the slugs in this one.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure everyone will appreciate that for sure. All right, this is on an Air Venturi Avenger setup guide, which is another way of saying Air Venturi Avenger tuning guide. This is from Darren Max. Hi, Steve. What an awesome review. Thank you, exclamation point. So I've been a subscriber of your channel for years, and I love your videos. I've seen you give 5 stars to a few and 1 star to some. But I've never seen you give 5 stars to a $300 rifle. Is it safe to assume there's an Avenger in your personal collection? Thanks, brother. I always learn something new from your channels. Yeah, I got an Avenger. I was so smitten with this air gun for $300, and I had somebody on YouTube fussing at me it was in the Catron video. He was fussing at me that I gave the Catron praise at a $1,250 air gun, but never praised the cheap stuff. I don't think I've given anything ever more praise than I've given this $300 thing, even though it's, hollow as a Halloween candy pumpkin with a strap on it. But
so the bullpup actually is made of different material.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's a totally different feel.
You don't got that anymore?
Feel like this.
Yeah.
It is a plastic. And I would guess it's hollow in there, but I asked, it's not just like a thicker, it's an actual different material. So they have upgraded the material it's made out of, and it has less of that hollow feel to it.
Good deal. If you guys are wondering,
all the stuff you like, and
hold on, I'm pointing to a box. That box right there. That has 2 Avenger bullpups in it, one for me and one for you guys. And Air Venturi did order Air Venturi did order a tuning guide, and it is a 25 caliber.
Okay.
So I'm really, really excited about that. But
yeah,
I send everyone to this gun that's on a budget.
Yeah, just before we went to record, I went out and there was a squirrel.
You took care of it. I was going to say, dude, the majority of squirrels who have given up the Ghost on the Chalet property in the last year have given up the Ghost to the Avenger, because I was able to put that eco tune on here, and it's quiet, with my DynFL adapter and my Hug It moderator there on the end, which I put on after the reviews. And
one of the interesting things about what we found out about the Avenger is that it favors the Tanto from DynFL. Interesting. Actually, we have consistently gotten reports back from customers that their gun likes the smaller. So not only is it like budget friendly, but it actually likes the budget friendly. The budget moderator as well. That's good to know. I used to recommend the Sumo a lot, and lately what we've been hearing back from people is, we're getting better accuracy and just as good a noise reduction from the Tanto. Out of the little guy, huh? No. Good deal. Now, I'll be the first one to say, if you're going to buy this for $300, recognize what you're buying. Yeah. This is how I work it all the way backwards in my head. Okay. If you're buying it for $300, the dealer's probably buying it for $150, and the manufacturer probably made it for like $50 because they got to make $100 before they sell it to the distributor, or the retailer's going to sell it to you. So just don't expect perfection. Don't expect super high quality materials, but I gotta say, for the money, I'm super blown away with the performance, the fit, the finish, the quality materials I got. I'm blown away with it. You want to know what I think? And the tunability, and the trigger, everything. You want to know what I think the best part is? What? This is what I think the best part is. What? If you have an itch to tune a rifle and learn about tuning a rifle, learn to tune on an Avenger. Because what you learn from that, watch Steve's video, and what you learn from the process of tuning this directly applies to other air guns that can be tuned. Yeah, guys. Okay, if I move this up, then I've got to adjust this. And if I go down with this, I also have to go down with this. And if I get it out of line, I find it's a very easy gun to get back to a kind of zeroed out spot so you can start over. And the Avenger is the gun that gave me the bravery to start doing some tuning with my already good performing and already set up the way I wanted them. It gave me the bravery to say, you know what, I'd like to be able to do something a little different with that rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And working on this gun gave me the bravery to start doing that work on other rifles where I know I could have done it, but really felt I don't want to mess anything up.
Yeah.
And if it's totally messed up, I don't want to ship it anywhere to get it fixed.
Yeah.
But the price point of this gun to me was in a place where, okay, I'm going to get it. I'm going to start trying. And then when I had success with it, and it was like, oh, okay, that's how that works together. Oh, that. And it's not that I can't listen to a video or read an article or a forum and get the concept, but it's doing it. To me, having some confidence has to involve I've actually done it. And so I kind of cut teeth on that rifle, the original version in 177, because that's what I got. And now, you know, it's like I can take that gun and say, oh, so we're going to shoot some knockouts. Okay, we're going to go here, I'm going to go here. We're there. We're good. Let's go shoot.
Yeah.
Oh, bring it back because I'm going to loan it to the neighbor and he's going to whack some chipmunks with it. I'm going to set it up with the, you know, the Hades 177.
I think your message is a really, really important one, PJ. And I loved everything that I heard you just say. This guys is your tricycle.
Yep.
This is your training wheels. And another thing you said that kind of got me to thinking. I have a lot of people ask me the question, will you tune my gun? Like, will you do a video on tuning my gun so I know how to tune it? Or have you done a tuning guide on this gun so that I can learn how to tune? Everything you learn in the tuning guide on this gun is 100% applicable to a Daystate, a Brocock, an FX,
right,
or whoever's.
If you look at that between that and the Maverick, right?
Yeah.
You have to turn the hole to get your Allen key in there, but you're still doing the same kind of turning.
It's the same thing.
Play with that rod, and all you're doing is adjusting how much compression is on that spring. The only thing different is once you set that preload, now you've got a wheel with a cam on it that allows you to make some on-the-fly adjustments without getting your Allen key out. But it's the same.
The lessons are the same. The approach is the same. You're balancing forces and you're balancing pressures, and you're looking for harmonic sweet spots, and you're looking for a velocity and a not waste air being dumped out the end each shot situation where your stuff's going to fly true and straight. And this is just such a good tool for that. And and the barrel on this is unbelievable. I don't know what the heck they're doing with their barrels. Unbelievable. So the takeaway is go to any of my tuning guides on anything, and you're going to learn. Even if you're just adjusting the hammer spring on your Air Max Catron or your caliber gun Cricket, it's all the same. It's all the same teachings.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're actually almost through this. This is a good one right here. Hopefully that answered your question, Darren Max. Yeah, I think it did. Okay, so this is FX Maverick Tuning Guide. Bad Boy Rick says, hello, I have a Maverick 25 cal compact standard 500 millimeter barrel. Reg 175, first reg 175, second 150. Power wheel 7, internal hammer spring. You don't know where it's at. None of us ever do unless you take it apart and measure it or count the turns. And shoot JSB knockout slugs, 33.5 grains to 885 feet per second. The slugs spiral. Double exclamation point. Does anyone know why? Question mark. I forgot the whole first part of what he said. I just zoom in on the spiral. But what?
I don't know if he's going fast enough. And this may be, he may be up against the wall of, if it were a longer barrel, you might have that ability to get that little higher speed that might help those stabilize.
Yeah, I'm with PJ. If it's a slug and I'm getting, he called it spiral, I call it corkscrew or wobble. If it's a slug and I'm getting that, the first place I go is I'm not moving fast enough yet to stabilize that football. If it's a pellet, the first place I go is I'm moving too fast and I've destabilized the football. I mean, it's hard to know. With the slug, I'm not as worried with the waste air coming out and disrupting it as I would be with a pellet. But I would guess where you're guessing is that he's probably not going fast enough.
So the way to figure out, I guess if I were in his shoes and committed to, I'm going to try this. Turning down the velocity and seeing if you get the same results is easy. You know, it costs nothing but time and slugs, right? Just turn down the power wheel and see if you get the same results. If you get the same results, right, go back up to 7, turn in the hammer spring a quarter turn or an eighth of a turn, and tell me, are you getting the same velocity? Getting the same velocity or the velocity is going down, then you are maxed out for that particular reg pressure.
Sure.
So scale it back.
Yeah, and he's at
and your only other option without spending money is to up the reg pressure.
Well, so there's such a huge red flag on here, PJ.
Well, he's at pressure.
He's at 175 bar reg.
But that's the first reg. He's at 150.
Okay, well, even 150.
But he doesn't have much more to go, which is what tells me that
super high.
If he turns the power wheel down and he's gaining velocity, he's over-regged for that hammer spring pressure.
Right, that makes sense. That's another great tip.
So, I mean, the first thing to do would be
back off the hammer spring.
Back off the hammer spring and see what happens.
See if it goes faster.
If it goes down and it goes slower, then you are still climbing, and you know you're in that part of the. We don't know if you're at the top of the hill, but you're at least going up the hill.
So this is a 33.5 grain knockout. So that's a 25 cal. Yeah, 25 cal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean a 500 millimeter barrel. I'm starting with my reg at like 120.
Right.
Not 150, and I'm going to back the hammer way, way, way out, and I'm going to start bringing that hammer up until my velocity goes up and then starts falling. To your point, once it starts falling, I've gone too far. Back it off again till it's high, and if I don't get there, then bring up the reg, bring up the hammer. They go up together and they go down together. Yeah.
And I just don't know the 25 cal well enough to know if that's a achievable speed with that projectile from a 500 millimeter barrel.
Yeah, that seems like an awful.
I'm claiming ignorance. I'm claiming ignorance on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a heavy slug too for a 500 millimeter.
Now we're back into that. Okay, well, a longer barrel doesn't mean it's more accurate, but it does allow you to get a little more velocity. You know, and if a 600 millimeter barrel, what did he say the velocity was?
885.
I would be willing to bet that a 600 millimeter barrel would take that probably to 910, 915, and a 700 millimeter barrel would put that at 930 to 950. That's my guess.
Yeah, I'm remembering back to
are not my thing.
I'm remembering back now to, I think it was the Maverick, but literally bolting on the crown continuum was the same. Going from that, I think that 380 to that 600 or 700, whatever it was like a bolt-on 100 feet per second with the exact same setting.
Yep.
Might have been more. It was like a bolt-on buck 25 feet per second or something like that. But to answer his question, I think he's got to speed the slug up. And I think in order to speed his slug up, he needs to get way off of that reg. Get that reg down to 110.
He needs to find out if he's over-regged.
I can almost promise he is at 150. Yeah. You don't have to run a Maverick to 150 to get the power out of it.
I just don't know the 25 and what those numbers are because I haven't played with that.
Well, I have.
I can tell you in the 22, that's ridiculous. That's almost twice what you need in a 22.
Yeah, you don't need it because it's not so much the reg pressure, guys, because remember the 25, you change the not the fill probe, the bolt probe, and that bolt probe might have like a larger hole in it.
Yep.
And it might even have a different weight hammer. So it's not like it probably doesn't. I don't know. Double check me, but it's not just the reg pressure. So if I'm him, I'm getting that reg pressure down 120, 125 on that second reg.
Start over.
Keep the 25 differential back. Put my cam to a 7, back way out on the internal hammer spring, and just start moving that internal hammer spring in until I've gotten the velocity as high as I can get it. And if I'm not where I want to be, to your point, now it's time to bring the reg up another 5 bar, back everything out, try it again.
For all these questions where it's like I'm lost, really, I mean, I think I could maybe speak for both of us. Go back down to the first floor. Yeah. And work yourself back up.
That's
the place to start.
It's exactly why.
Don't start from high stuff and work it down. If you're like, works. Hey, this is all messed up. Yeah. Back out that hammer spring, preload, bring the regulator pressure down, find a balance point low, and then start working it up together.
Exactly what PJ said. I never try to fix it when it's messed up here. If it's messed up here, I throw the baby out with the bathwater and I just start all over. Mm-hmm. Because it's the only way to tune properly. You need to arrive at the tune. You don't stumble upon the tune. And when you get high and you start fishing, you're going to be stumbling forever. You just got to back away off, try it again. And besides, the gun will talk to you. At 120 bar, power wheel 7, internal hammer spring backed all the way out. You have to go through that process, working that internal hammer spring in at those settings to see where the velocity goes up as you're working it in, to stay in the same flat, 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 and then it starts coming down. You have to find that place. Mm-hmm. And that place is where the magic is going to happen because well, now I've met the regulator where it's at. Meeting the regulator where it's at is often in the upper part of that window.
Yep.
That's where things get beautiful. That's where you get 2 SDs and 10 ASs, and that's the process. No matter what I'm tuning, that's the way I go by it.
Yeah.
And I think it's what you're saying too.
Yeah, I think where we have differences, I might start a little bit lower, and I tend to, from a power wheel standpoint, I tend to work off the 5.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
So I give myself a little bit more.
Sure.
Once I'm somewhere I really like it, I can go up a little and go down a little. That just tends to be where I've settled on working from.
And that's not a lot of the pro shooters I've noticed do that. They'll do just like PJ is so that they can go up and down if they need to. But a lot of the pro shooters also go right for power wheel 7. They maximize accuracy for that power wheel 7. And when the winds come up, they start backing off that power wheel and bringing their pellet velocity down.
Yep.
Because when the winds come up, it's counterintuitive. You have to slow your pellet down or you start getting that. And they want that ability to back off. They know the upper echelon of where their gun's going to perform. And if it's not hitting its mark time after time, they have to back it off. I saw that. I've seen that become pattern at RMAC and EBR. In the Pyramid Air Cup. It's so interesting watching these guys. You can learn a lot from them.
Yeah. Pellets especially, they Olympic shooters are shooting ridiculously low.
600 feet per second. 500 feet per second.
If even that,
But they're at 25 yards.
They are going meters, a smaller. Yeah, they are going a small one in 10 meter rifle too.
Yeah, 30 feet.
It's incredible precision. I mean, the difference between 10.8 and 10.9 is like, you can't even, it's like, what?
I know, but it's the same. It's the same shooting 100 yards. The guy or the girl who wins and the one that didn't it's that close sometimes. And it's all about getting your gun to go well in the wind.
Keith and I was in 7th place. Keith and I were like less than 10 points apart. 1st to 7th, and it's tight. I mean, you don't want to get yourself in a place where you're like, boy, if I'd had 2 trigger pulls back.
Yeah. Oh, I know, that'd be the worst. I can't imagine. I'm so glad that I don't compete with you guys. Like, there's a part of me that when I'm there filming, I'm like, I want to play. Yeah. But then there's a part of me when I see you guys go up to the line in your hands are literally doing this like grown men who wield guns for a living, like PJ. You know, it's just like, you know, that's no thanks. I'm good. I'm good being the camera guy.
I was so nervous that morning we were talking at Armac. Like, you know, I'm trying to get all my stuff. I'm like in my mode.
Yeah.
And Chris Turek calls me up. Hey, can you get down here? Steve wants to talk to us.
Steve wants to do us both.
I'm like, okay. I'm packing up the room. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Like, you know, and it's like, okay, here we go.
God bless you guys. You have balls of solid rock to get on camera and then go shoot and deal with all that. You must have needed like a tranquilizer and a therapist at the end of that.
Well, I had like a 22-hour drive home after the banquet, so I had plenty of time to kind of decompress from that experience.
Oh, I'll bet. Well, bless you guys for sharing so much.
It was awesome.
All right, let's see. Let's look for another good one here. You know, this other gentleman in the tuning guide, it's the same thing we've been talking about. I don't know that you and I need to answer it, but I'm going to read it just for sake of the audience can see the pattern of what I get from them, you know. FX Maverick tuning guy, Bob Van Den Heuvel. Hi, Steve. Thanks for the great work! Exclamation point. I must have spent hours watching your videos. Smiley face. Thanks, buddy. Forgive my ignorance, but is IHS the fine adjustment setting for the hammer spring? Yes. And if so, what is the takeoff point? It being turned all the way in? Yeah, it can go all the way in until it stops. If so, I'm definitely going to try out. I'm definitely going to try some of your tunes. I've tried several different slugs. It's been really frustrating so far. Kind regards, Bob. So I will say the internal hammer spring and that knob that you see on a lot of these FX guns, they're just a function of one another. You know, that big knob kind of controls the macro movements, and that little internal hammer spring screw controls the internal movements. And you have to dial them. They both push on the exact same, they both compress the exact same spring that the single valve uses. And they're in tandem, and they work in tandem with one another. When I think of all the different designs of like the Crown, the Impact, the Maverick. Yeah, like I don't want to get too specific, but they are functions of one another and they work together.
They're like three sides of a triangle. Like there's geometry to how they.
Yes.
Every once in a while I see something where I think, I wish somebody would have asked me what to call that. Not a huge fan of calling it the micro and macro adjuster because I don't think that actually does what those two different tools do.
Oh, for me it does, so that's interesting.
Well, to me, macro and micro means big adjustments and small adjustments.
Right.
But really what that So
yeah, I can see them. Good right there.
What this is doing is putting tension on the spring like prior to it being cocked. This tension over here gets added sort of after it's been cocked.
In that scenario on that gun.
And in the Crown especially, what you'll see is if you go cranking that hammer spring screw up, yes, you will, because I mean that really it is user adjustable on the Crown.
You can't get the knob on and off if you do that.
Right. Yeah. So it is user adjustable, but it's not like user friendly adjustable. And similar on the Mark I or the original Impact, you could adjust it, but it was Loctited and it wasn't friendly to adjust. And what you saw in those guns is when you boosted, if you will, if you turned it in, what you did see was a shift in what the power was. So let's say my gun on the wheel was shooting, I'm just going to pick numbers because it's easy. It was shooting from 850 to 900, right? That was the range.
On your wheel.
On my wheel, on the ABC.
And then you come in a little on the IIHS.
So I move this in.
Yep, a little bit.
Now I'm going up to 910.
Yeah.
But I used to have a range of 50. Now I only have a range of 40.
So it's like preload on a shock absorber.
I go a little bit further and I can go to 920, but now I only have a range of 35. And this is where it's like a geometric arrangement. The more you go up on that preload, yes, you will achieve higher, excuse me, but you will also start to shrink the range of what you get in terms of adjustment.
I think that's a super, super good point. And the only other thing I want to add,
and I don't know how many people have ever noticed. I know I had a conversation. I've talked to Ted about it, Ted Beer.
Yeah.
It's just not one of those things like, and so you get into like, this is the micro adjuster, which implies that it's making small changes. And because it's so finely graduated, they are. But if you crank it from all the way on this end to all the way on this end, what you're doing is shrinking what this wheel
You're shrinking that workable window. You know, your genius, PJ, you know, I think a lot of us get this up here, but then to be able to vocalize it and teach it, that's where the real genius is. And that's where you are just so strong. And that's why I'm so glad that we did this together. But not to take away from that, but my thinking of like, in my head, they're different. The Crown is different than the Impact was, and the Impact was different than the Dreamline was, and the Dreamline worked differently than the Maverick. As far as that relationship between the internal hammer spring and that macro wheel. Like, I feel like with the Crown, to your point, it was almost like gain, you know, it was like a gain knob for that wheel. Where with the Maverick, I felt more like it was a fine tuning of the wheel. But I guess to your point, I think you're right. And I think I'm wrong. I think the way I've thought about it in the past has not been right. The macro adjustment is a function of where you are on the micro adjustment or the internal hammer spring adjuster. And I think that's exactly what you've put into words. And I feel like you're dead on about that.
I do think what's going to be cool is that I won't be surprised if in the future more of FX rifles will have that. And I'll just use the micro adjuster. And I think the best thing about it is that this conversation we've had, I don't know how many times in the last 2 hours about I've lost where zero is or where neutral or whatever is. You don't get that when you have that wheel arrangement on the outside with a graduated, it's like an old school AM FM radio where you can see where the dial is on the AM FM spectrum.
With clicks where it falls into place and goes back to that spot.
Got the tense and it's graduated. You don't ever get lost on that. We're on the Crown and on the Dreamline and on the Maverick and the Wildcat and everything else. You can get lost in there. It's not something to be afraid of because you can always go back to actual zero. Like, you know, let's just push the screw as far as it goes this way. And that's, you know, the bottom, and then we'll start coming back out. So this is a Crown. This is the ABC 123 wheel.
I'll turn it around. Yeah, I was just going to say, so back out right there. Perfect.
You have a dual-sided cam, right?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the new version of an impact wheel. Okay. And the cam is just like different shape.
Yeah, I see that.
Instead of being an egg where you go up and down on both sides,
it's a progressive wheel.
Progressive all the way to the top.
I like that better.
I do too. I think it's way more intuitive.
Yeah.
And so this is going to go on my Mark II. This wheel is, and this is actually what came off of my Crown because they have a Crown wheel that now gives you the full thing. And I won't be shocked. And I don't have any inside. I don't work for FX. I don't have any inside info on anything. But I'd be shocked if at some point in the future a crown doesn't have that external, because the screws there, it's just hidden.
The cam, the profile. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean,
At
it's
some
like,
point you'll have that click wheel, because that is so genius. All of like we
well,
spent
the aftermarket came up with it. I forget the name of the company. They came up with that progressive wheel for the FX stuff.
Okay,
So
I didn't know there was one out there.
Yeah,
So.
it makes sense that they be using that. I do want to, we've been focusing so heavily on the Venturi Avenger and the FX stuff,
Yeah.
and how it's like this tuning can be overwhelming and you can really lose your place. I work for Daystate and FX, and this is a great time for me to mention the digital tuning world, like the Daystate line of guns are electronic tuning.
Mm-hmm.
And and if you have that and you know how to work it, and if you don't, check out my videos on it. Going back to these sweet spots literally takes like 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's super cool.
It's super cool. It's expensive, but those Daystates are doing very well in the competitions where the money is, just like the FXs are. And I'm not trying to sound like a paid shill, but that's the reality of the situation. Both of these brands are doing so well. And if you're watching this and you're going, oh, that tuning thing kind of freaks me out, I don't want to have to go back and try to find the spot. Check out the Daystate, because that technology, if that's of your primary importance, it's very easy to go back and find where you were. You have several programs you can store in the gun. I know this pellet works good at this speed, and you can store 3 of them. And the new Delta Wolves, I think you can store a lot more of them.
Yeah, and I've had trigger time on the Red Wolf, which is a beautiful shooting gun. In fact, the first performance PCP I was ever exposed to was an old Daystate Airwolf, which my buddy Noah has, and it's an amazing gun to shoot. I mean,
Exactly.
it's just so refined, and it's beautiful, and it feels great in your hands, and super accurate. It's a great gun. Are you doing anything Delta Wolf?
Yeah, they've offered, actually.
I think the upside, like to me, where they've really taken a step forward on that is the idea that they're going to give you a little easier way to get in and do that playing around.
Well, you're doing it a lot. It's going to be phone and this other stuff, but it'll be Delta Wolf is going to be late 2022 probably, is when I told them would be a good time for me.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm an FX fanboy, but I'm also really passionate about what I'm seeing Daystate doing. Full disclosure. So we've really been beaten on that FX drum today, but there's other good things for you guys to look at out there. And I just wanted to make sure to mention it, so that we didn't get too beside ourselves. Are you good on that one, or do you want to talk a little bit more?
No, that's good.
Yeah, I think we covered that.
I like lots of different brands of air guns too, so lots of fun.
Yeah, for sure. What do they sell it? There's a seat for every ass.
Yeah.
Is that the nicest way to put that?
That's pretty good. Pretty
good. This gentleman says, this is Brock Warva. Can I ask what you would set the first reg and second reg for a JSB 44.75 grain pellets? I'm a newbie and need some guidance. So I'll just quickly say, watch all of the tuning guides, because there's no magic number that we can just give you. It's all about.
Do you say what gun, Steve?
No, which is good. I'm glad that he did
some advice on that.
Yeah.
Give some advice on that. So if I were to assume he's buying that gun new, I would talk to my retailer about what I'm going to shoot. Yeah. And before I do anything, I'm going to shoot the hell out of that gun.
Yeah, and companies like Utah Airguns.
Yeah, so many of our
you tell them what your expectations are, and you pay an additional service for their tuning service, and they'll make it shoot right for what you want if you don't want to fool with it. But my message would be very different. It's just take everything you've learned in all these different tuning guides and back way out on everything and go in search of your nugget tune.
My M3 is at 100 bar. I shoot the 44s, and I'm at 856-ish.
Mm-hmm. That's where people seem to want to be on the 30 cals.
Where I shoot for competition.
Yeah, 850. I've heard that a lot.
For my hunting setup, I go a little bit hotter, but not by much.
Sure. That's
Because that
great
needs to be
information.
accurate too.
Great information. 100 bar. It's awesome. Oh, Brock's next question. Sorry, it's a Maverick 30 caliber. So yeah, start at 100.
Unless it's the compact, I would be going in the same spot.
So 100 bar, 125 bar on the two regs is where I'd begin.
Where I'd start.
Back out on the hammer spring, go from there.
Yep.
Put it on either the max on the cam or the second or third from the max like you like to do, and just go in search of that beautiful.
Now, if you're on a shorter barrel, you're going to have to get a little more air to get that up to speed with a shorter barrel. That's just the reality of it.
The 30 cal probably only comes, I'm guessing, in the 600 and 700, I would guess.
I think they make a 30 cal compact.
Whoa.
I think they do.
Okay. Dude, there's only 2 more questions. Can't believe we got through all this, and it's only been 2 hours, 16 minutes, and 12 seconds, according to the Skype timer here. FX Crown Continuum Setup Guide, Michael Britton. So on rewatching the video, I have a Crown Mark II with an amp regulator, and the manual states to turn the screw to increase the reg pressure with the air in the system, but never reduce reg pressure without removing the bottle and dry firing the air from the system. So who's right? Or did FX ship my Mark II with a Mark I manual? Really confused. I definitely have some things to say about that, but
no, you go ahead, please, on that.
So the manuals are often not in harmony with the products across all the brands. FX is not immune from that. They did switch to that amp regulator mid-production cycle. So if you're pre-amp regulator, you definitely want to purge the air from your FX before you go and decrease regulator pressure. If you have an amp regulator, they've been designed to handle you increasing regulator pressure, which means clockwise on the screw. But you don't want to do that in huge amounts. Their exact words to me when I talk to them directly, about a quarter turn at a time, dry fire it a couple of times to let everything equalize, then a quarter turn at a time, dry fire it, let things equalize. Otherwise, you're putting a lot of pressure on stuff. I've done the quarter turn thing and blown out FX regulators, and I've done the quarter turn thing, and some have been fine. So, I mean,
when I start doing that stuff, I go to a trusted source, because you can go one way but not the other way.
Yep.
And I have to remember which way is which way, right? This way's counterclockwise, this way's clockwise.
Righty tighty, lefty loosey.
Backwards, right?
Yeah.
And I write it down on my notebook. You can do this, but you can't do that. And when I'm working, I look at that 8 times, if not 10. Because that whole, like, is it left? Is it right? Is it going this way? Is it going that way? Which way am I going?
I don't have that.
I'm so worried.
Oh, that's so funny.
Like, crank something up, and then it's like, okay, well, that's now broken, and it's going to take how long to get to get parts, and am I going to have to ship that off? That's deeper hood than I typically go, like replacing a regulator. I would not feel comfortable replacing a regulator.
Oh, it's so incredibly easy. On that gun behind you, Maverick, it's so insanely easy. It's like a 5-minute deal, literally.
Yeah.
It really is.
The
way they've designed it is just so genius. But I do want to answer his question very specifically. On the amp regulators, I know what they say. I typically go like an eighth, like a half of a quarter. So that's an eighth. I'll go an eighth, dry fire it a couple times, go an eighth, dry fire it a couple times. If I go a third eighth.
I think you want to do that anyway. You want to make these small adjustments.
You want to make small adjustments. And I found interesting with those guns, I'll be on my like third eighth, and I'll dry fire it like a couple of times, and then I'll dry fire it that 4th time, and I'll hear the whole thing like equalize pressure and relax. And that kind of told me, whoa, stuff was building in there uncomfortably high to where you might want to be dry firing 4 or 5 times. So,
well, and with when we start talking about, when they first came out with that amp regulator, nothing had a really large size plenum,
right.
and that plenum volume not messes with, but changes the equation in terms of, how it's all linked together to work and where the valves are relative to those plenum spaces. And the bigger the plenum, I think the more times you're going to have to do that dry fire to get that equalization.
Oh, for sure. It's like adding 100 cc's to a 400 cc bottle. It's insane. Of course, the thing holds a lot of air.
Well, that's what you start once you start getting in and you're tuning like one of these M3s or the Maverick, which both have really large plenums. And I think maybe you even made a note on that in one of your videos. Have your air source ready, because when you degas that, especially on my compact, you've taken like a third. When you screw that bottle in, you just took a third of the volume of the air.
I mentioned that in the Maverick tuning guide. I had a couple of bottles out there, but that's something that nobody talks about.
No.
And I was like, I better mention this because I've never heard anybody say this ever.
Right.
And so I thought I'd share it with the audience.
100%.
Yeah. All right. So last one. This is also on the Maverick tuning guide. Ed Bronbeck. Great vid, Steve, and thank you! Exclamation point. It really helped to connect the content from other sites and channels. It sounds like the M3 tuning could land the same time mine does. Yeah, I'm going to do a tuning guide on that. M3, it's different. I think what's got me so excited, PJ, about that M3 that you got behind you there are those fine-tuned macro adjustments to where you can really dial in that waste air without so much of a process. People always ask, why is the M3 $500 or $600 more than a Maverick comparably equipped? And I really feel like more than anything, you're paying for that convenience and time of not having to depressurize with the regs, and you're paying for the added micro tuning adjustments of that gun, which really helps one control the waste air behind that pellet or slug as it leaves. Yeah, we can all get our guns shooting 100 or 1 inch at 100 yards fairly easy, but those adjustments are what enable it to run at a ½ inch consistently at those distances. And I think because of that, I'm super excited.
Yeah, I think it does a little bit, for the platform, what has held me back in the past on tuning is I've got a gun, I like how it's set up, and it's working really well, but I want to try something different. I want to go to a slug, or I want to go to something else, and I want to try a different pellet, or some of those things, like you want to try something different, and there's this hesitancy because how am I ever going to be able to get back to where I was? And knowing that, okay, well, I can record this setting easily, and I can record this setting easily, and I can record this setting easily, and it will repeatedly go back to those numbers, opens the door to, I don't have to worry about, am I really going to screw this up, because I know what I can dial it back to. We can talk about, like, I'm going to go a quarter turn, but I don't know about you, but this is not that finely tuned of an instrument. And, kind of what I feel is a quarter turn is that 3/16 or is it 5/16? And you never really know, especially once you start turning those screws that you actually can't see. I never feel like I know that I'm going to be able to get that back exactly where I want it to. And so with a graduated scale, going right back to where it was.
It's going right back to it. And I think it's something really interesting you talk about. I have the same Allen wrench set that I bought off of Amazon. I wonder how many of us have that same exact set.
Yeah.
But I've had them to where, tuning these guns where I'll turn that. It's not even visible, but it's an audible, little crack of the threads in there. Now I found the sweet spot, especially on these FX guns. So I think the end game really is going to start to focus on these micro tuning, because that's what brings you into greatness from really solid goodness.
Yeah.
When you start talking 100 yards and competition level stuff and the ability to control that, make those little adjustments in the wind on the go are everything to getting your pellet or slug to chill out as it traverses its 300 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A long way.
It is. It is. So I want to say, I think in closing that, guys, if you've made it this far, like this Ask AEAC has been very tuning focused. It's been in a big way FX tuning focused. Again, that's because my perception is that that's where PJ's brilliance lies in, and I'm sure he's got more. But going forward, you know, I would love to do one of these with Tyler Patner, like at Pyramid Area Insider, and Rick Ream, shooter 1721, and these guys have had their hands on so many different guns. So with questions, I'll pick out questions that take us down a totally different pathway. So if you guys have enjoyed this, I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments and going forward. If it would interest you to just kind of for me to make my way around the industry and include some more geniuses like PJ here on a whole assortment of just different audience questions, and that way we can all kind of learn and grow together.
I can't imagine, Steve, the volume of questions you get with every one of your releases. I know with my smaller channel how many, comments come through, and I try my best to answer every one. I applaud you for taking this on, because I know people do have, and these are all good, legit questions. It's really nice when they include smiley faces and exclamation points about positive things.
Oh, I know, God.
You see those ones and you try to walk on by.
I said it before, you got to be resilient to be a YouTuber, man, because there are some angry spirited people out there.
Yeah.
But with that said, guys, PJ is nipping at the heels of 5,000 on his YouTube channel.
Yep.
And, he's a factory shooter for Donnie FL and Saber, and he's a part of the family over there at Donnie FL and Saber. So he's an inside guy. So I've noticed you being quite a bit of a how-to spokesman for that crowd. So if you want to learn yourself something and you've been really taken back by the level of intelligence that PJ has been bestowing upon us today, then get over there and get subscribed to his channel too, because he's one of those guys that's doing great things and going to great places and cares deeply for our industry.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we do too.
For the opportunity to be here. A lot of fun talking to you, and I hope people get something from what we're talking through.
Oh, I have no doubt. It's a niche crowd, to be sure. This isn't going to be for everyone, but there's some people out there that think this stuff is neat, and there's a lot to be learned. Do you have Facebook and Instagram, PJ?
I do. There is a Wisconsin Airgunners page on Facebook. Instagram is PJ_Clarke, and also Wisconsin Airgunners. Two different Instagram accounts.
Okay. And I'm at Hooked on Air on both Facebook and Instagram. Hooked on Air Instagram, like PJ said, if you want to know what I'm doing every day. I get a lot of questions. Oh, what's next? What are you working on? Instagram.
It's there.
It's real time. As I see it, the picture goes up with the tech note. Yeah. Facebook is more of a summary, photo pack, what's going on in the industry, press releases, fun videos, that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can do Airgun Exploration and Advancement channel on Facebook or AEAC. It should bring you right there, or Hooked on Air. Damn, dude, 2 hours and a half.
I'm an old guy, so my Facebook tends to be keeping up with family and old high school friends and stuff like that. Instagram is all shooting stuff for me.
I love all your social media posts. They're so good. That one the other day with the thunder, snow, and the rain and the snow all going on at the same time, and the lightning in Wisconsin, that was so cool.
Yeah, we got a little snowback, but I'll tell you, my snowmobiling buddies are just like, we're not going to get anything.
Oh, because the water washes all the snow away?
Yep.
Yeah.
The lakes, the ice fishermen love it, though, because they now, we're back to hard freeze, so they've got good ice, so they're out there slaying the crappies.
You lucky dog. I told you before, PJ, my heart is with you in Wisconsin. I went to college in Minnesota and spent a lot of time hunting and fishing in Wisconsin over those 4 years. So I am envious. And thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thanks for giving me 2.5 hours of your life. I'm going to click this stop now. And bye, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us. And let us know what you think in the comments down below if you want to see more of this or if you hated it and thought it was a waste of time. Thanks, guys. See ya.